Good afternoon. Today's topic will be about readability and understanding its importance to classroom instruction and how to determine readability. First of all, if you look at the Common Core standards, you will understand how important it is to determine the readability of the text that you are using in your classroom. Studies done by the Common Core Standards group have determined that the texts that we're using in our classrooms are very often not challenging our students, and as a result, students are not ready for college and for careers. So it's important that we know what the readability is of our texts that we are using so that we can help prepare our students for not just the next level of education, but for college and for careers. One important thing to remember is that there are both easy and stretch texts. Easy texts are okay to use in class as long as they're not providing a steady diet for your students. Stretch texts are also important to use in class, but again, as long as they are not providing a steady diet. Students need a variety of texts at different levels to help them improve. So if you imagine yourself doing exercise, you wouldn't do the most intensive exercise the entire time. You would vary the difficulty level so that you could have a chance to build muscle and increase stamina. Same is true with texts. You can stretch students with texts that are challenging, that are above their level. However, you do not want to overwhelm them by using them all the time, every time. You also should know that it's okay to use both short and long texts. If you're using short texts, one important thing that you can do with your short texts is to read, reread, and do a close reading of the texts. That means that when you are doing your short texts, you should be using a very difficult text, because students will then have a chance to read and reread and look at the text carefully. When you're using longer texts, make sure that they're not going to be overwhelming for the students, or make sure that they do have support for their reading. Original texts and stale texts are also important. Obviously, if a student has not been provided any background or is reading a text for the first time, it will be more challenging for the student. As a result, then, the student will either need to read it more slowly or have an easier text. If you're using stale texts that have been used before, students can have already used their cognitive ability to get the gist of the reading, and they can go back and reread and read more carefully or more closely. One of the readability formulas mentioned in our book is the Raygor readability formula. Basically, this is a labor-intensive formula that you can use, but if you do choose to use it, you need to count out 3 separate passages from your text. The passages need to be 100-word passages. You should choose them from different portions of the text. Then what you need to do for each of the 3 passages is you need to count the sentences in each passage, and then you need to count the words in each passage that has 6 or more letters. Then basically what you do is you average the sentence length across the passages and the word length across the passages, and you plot the average on the graph. If you look on the left side of the graph, you'll see that it has the average number of sentences per 100 words, and across the bottom of the graph you have the average numbers of character words per 100 words. So these are the number of words that are 6 or longer, 6 letters or longer. And then basically you find where they intersect, and that is approximately the grade level band of the reading. You also have access to the Flesch Kincaid readability score if you're using Microsoft Word. Basically it is a tool that's used in the spell check, and I'll show you in a little bit how to get to that, but this is what the results page looks like. Another easy tool that you can access is the Lexile Analyzer. It's on Lexile.com. It requires you to submit 100-word passages or longer in a text file, and it automatically analyzes the text using a variety of sentence length, and word frequency or word commonality. Another text complexity measure that you should consider is the Common Core approach to measuring text complexity. This can be found in Appendix A, this information, on page 4. And basically the 3 parts that you need to consider when considering readability under the Common Core. The 3 parts are qualitative dimensions of text complexity, quantitative dimensions of text complexity, and then reader and task considerations. Basically, under the qualitative dimensions of text complexity, you need to think about the structure of the passage. So, say for example, if it's in language arts and it's an alternating narrative, or an example in math is if a term is defined or used early in a chapter but then is not defined until several pages later. These are things that you would have to determine by reading the text carefully. An online analyzer or an electronic analyzer would not pick up this information. Under quantitative dimensions of text complexity, this is referring to the tools that we just talked about, or different tools. You know, these are not the only tools that I've shown you. These are not the only tools. So you could use different measures of quantitative text readability to figure out the text complexity here. And then finally, reader and task considerations. When you think of the purpose of the task, say for example, is a student reading for fun? Are they reading to read carefully and closely? Are they reading to learn? Are they reading to gather basic information? And also student motivation or reader motivation. How motivated and how prepared is a student to read the information that you're putting in front of them? So the Common Core Appendix A offers you basically a 3-pronged approach to look at readability of texts. Here's a sample text taken from an online math textbook, and it's related to the quadratic equation. What I did is I typed up this particular text in Microsoft Word, and I performed a Raygor readability formula on it. As you can see, I've done a number of things here. First of all, in the box at the bottom, you can see that I marked the point where we reached 100 words. As explained in the directions, I didn't count any of the formulas or numbers, but I counted everything else. Then what I did is I counted the number of sentences. And let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences in this 100-word passage. And then finally what I did is I went through and I counted each word or numbered each word that had 6 letters or longer, and we ended up having 31 words that had 6 letters or longer. So when I graphed out the information on the Raygor readability graph, you can see by the yellow star on my graph that this text, according to Raygor readability, is somewhere in the 9th grade reading band. The next thing I did was I looked at the Flesch Kincaid, and I want to take a moment to show you how to do that. So basically, here's the passage as it is typed up in my Microsoft Word. What you want to do to get the Flesch Kincaid is click on Spelling and Grammar, which is under the Review tab. And then when the window pops up to show you your errors, make sure that you click Options down in the bottom left-hand corner. Under Options, you want to make sure that you have Proofing clicked on the left sidebar, and then you scroll down under Correcting Spelling and Grammar. You can see that the Show Readability Statistics box is checked. If you have that box checked, every time you spell check, you should get the readability statistics at the end of your spell checking. So I'm just quickly going to zip through here, and you can see that the readability statistics come up as a grade point level of 11.1 for this quadratic equation passage. The next readability tool that we used, or I used, was the Lexile Analyzer. What you need to do is go to www.lexile.com. You should not need to set up an account to use the Lexile Analyzer. What you will need to do, though, is click on the Use Lexile Measures in the blue bar. And it pops up a bar for you, and you will choose Lexile Analyzer. The explanations of how to use the Lexile Analyzer are on the left sidebar. Basically, what you need to do is to have that document typed up in Microsoft Word or whatever word processing file that you're using, and you're going to save it, but you need to do it as a save as. And so we will click Save As and change it from the type of being a Word document to being plain text. This will allow the Lexile Analyzer to use it. And let's see here. Alright, so it's saved as plain text now. And so we can go back to the Lexile Analyzer. What we do then is click on Choose File and navigate to the file, which is our sample text. Notice right here it says Quadratic Equation Sample Text, and it's saved as a text document. I do not want to use the one that is saved as a Word document. So I choose that file and I click Submit. Now, because this has a lot of formulas, I get a message here that says to double check things. It's completely fine that we aren't using the formulas in our understanding. But notice how quickly it has analyzed our particular text. We have a Lexile measure of 1390. The mean sentence length is 25, and it analyzed 202 words. Now, what does a Lexile measure of 1390 mean? Well, in the Common Core State Standards Appendix A, you will see that they have Lexile ranges that are aligned to the Common Core expectations. And our Lexile came up for the quadratic equation passage as a 1390, which puts it above the college and career ready level. If you notice on the left hand side, we've got the standard grade levels, and then on the right hand side we have the standard Lexile ranges that students in those grade levels should be reading at on a regular basis. So our passage of the quadratic equation was was above what students should be reading on a regular basis. That doesn't mean we can't use it. It just means that we need to use stuff like that carefully. All right, what do we do when we look at the sample text with the Common Core State Standards? Well, first of all, we look at the qualitative measures. We can assume that this passage has one level of meaning. It's basically an informative passage teaching students how to use the quadratic equation. It appears to have clear structure. It doesn't jump around from idea to idea. It seems to be logically laid out. It does have dense and complex vocabulary, meaning that the vocabulary is difficult, and those difficult vocabulary words are used over and over. And also it requires specialized background knowledge. Most people, well, people without a background in math would not be able to jump in and understand this information. And in fact, people would have to have the right type of background in math with the right level of information to be able to understand this passage. When we look at the quantitative measures, notice when I counted the words per sentence, we had somewhere around 25 words per sentence, 25 words per sentence in most of the sentences. And again, we had multiple long words. There were 31 that we counted that were 6 words or 6 letters or longer. And the Flesch Kincaid, this is a mistake here, it didn't come out at 8.7, it came out in the 11th grade range. And then the Lexile range came out at 1390, which again, as I mentioned, puts it above the 11th to college and career ready band. Finally, the third thing we should consider is the reader and task. So my first question here is, will readers be motivated to read and understand the text without prior instruction? Meaning, could you give this passage to a student cold? My next question is, are most students strong enough in math at this level to understand and apply this information without prior instruction? Which means, do they have the appropriate background information and knowledge and skill to be able to apply this information? Another question to ask yourself, are students motivated to use the textbook as a way to enhance their concept understanding? So, will students be able to go back and read this information to help them understand what it is they're learning about the quadratic equation, to reinforce maybe perhaps what they've learned and practiced in class? And again, would this be assigned as an independent reading, or would it be an in-class reading that is supported by in-class activities, discussion, and some scaffolding? So when we look at the Common Core State Standard, Appendix A, readability measures, we look at we look at the qualitative, the quantitative, and the reader and task. So we're coming at it from multiple different directions. So what are the results here? We did have some discrepancy in the readability measures. While all of them did indicate high school or higher, they did range in where the information fell. This helps us to understand that readability tools are helpful, but they do not replace the human factor. So running a Lexile on a text or a Raygor or Flesch Kincaid can help you understand how difficult the text is, but it doesn't replace you. So remember, it's important to understand the qualitative, the quantitative, and the reader task considerations when you're looking at text complexity for your students. Now you should take a minute to look at the assignment in our Blackboard course and work on text complexity with a passage from your discipline. Good luck!